Oh, now, bro.
Hey, we're live. We're live. You're listening to Restore the Public, the voice of the people who's had enough. Enough of the corrupt judges, enough of the rogue cops, enough of the lawyers who twist the law, and the politicians who trample it. This is a show that dares to ask what happened to our de jure American government and how do we get it back. I'm your host, Sheriff Andrew Yank on the unincorporated Richland County, Ohio, and every week we expose the lies and decode the legal traps and empower you to reclaim what's rightfully yours. No fluff, no compromise, just fact. With me as always, Sheriff Adam Bonner from the unincorporated Summit County, Ohio. How's it going, Adam?
Hey, what's going on, Andrew? Anything special happening in your neck of the woods?
Well, you know, it started to storm a little bit ago, but I think that passed by, but everything else pretty good.
Got a little bit of that up here.
How do you think, real quick before we get started, what do you think about the state of the country? What's going on right now? You think we're in good shape? Any thoughts?
No, not really. I think there's a lot of things not being reported or documented conveniently, just like over in Europe. You know, there's a lot of riots and a lot of things like that happening outside of No King's Day. Has nothing to do with that. Just, you know, people standing up and coming together, realizing that, you know, the systems that make decisions for them aren't really thinking of their best interests or their people's best interests.
Well, you know, I've said this before, you know, I mean, the stock market's full of fucking crooks. The so-called, you know, our governmental service providers, full of crooks. The police enforcement, full of crooks. These judges, lawyers, this shit has got to stop. So anyways.
Well, I don't call them judges. I call them administrative law judges because they're administrators. You know, there hasn't been real judges since about 1789, historically.
Well, today we're going to be talking about why declared American state nationals reject the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, and Statutory Law. Today we're going to dive into the topic that challenges everybody you thought you knew about the law and citizenship. Why declared American state nationals are not and never have been subject to Uniform Commercial Code or statutory law. So whether you're curious, skeptical, or already on the path to reclaiming your American status, which everybody should be doing, this episode's for you. You know, to start off with the foundation of our political status, you know. Let's start with the basics. Adam, what is a declared American state national?
Well, somebody who reclaimed their political status, you know, to be back to giving allegiance to their state, whether they're a state national, state citizen, national of that state. It gets confused a lot. Those are the three variations. And, you know, the reasons particularly that I stay away from things such as UCC is because it was created whenever things are vague and statutory commercial stuff or ambiguous. They created UCC to fill the gap, you know, to bridge the gap, to connect the things so that way they could proceed and, you know, do all their statutory activity. And that just fills the gap, basically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sure I could explain it, you know, several different types of ways to, you know, different people that have different statuses done. But that's probably the, you know, the easiest in layman's terms. Other than that, you know, a U.S. citizen is someone who voluntarily subjects themselves to federal jurisdiction, often unknowingly. They're not aware of all of the tacit agreements and things of that nature through contract, licensing, registration. When you register something, you're giving up your rights.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's what that means, ultimately. And, you know, a municipal citizen, you know, so this is a status tied to the District of Columbia and federal territories. I don't feel like I need to expound on that. Do you want to add on it?
Well, you know what? Yeah, one simple little fact that ties a lot of things together that people don't think about. You know, there was some years ago when Obama was the CEO of that foreign corporation. And, you know, he was in charge of 57 states. And a lot of people always ask, they were asking me, oh, he screwed up. What does he mean? There's only 50 states.
Right.
Well, you have to remember this foreign corporation is a territorial issue. And, they're talking about the, what do you call it? The territories outside of America, like the Samoan Islands, the places like that, Puerto Rico,
Guam.
Yeah. So
Virgin
he was
Islands.
right. He wasn't lying to anybody. And another thing, that's how, everybody would say, well, how did he become president? You got to be born in the United States, and that debacle of where he was born. But what they fail to realize, in a foreign corporation that has nothing to do with this country, they can hire anybody they want.
Right. It's a corporation function. And, I had an attorney arguing with me about that point, not in so many words, like she was leaving the corporation part out, but I was picking up what she was putting down pretty clearly. So, I just was like, okay, I'm not going to, say no more. You're on my dime, so I'm not going to pay to talk about politics.
But you know what? It's those little kind of, you'd call him maybe a slip up, because he says it on national TV, but maybe he meant to do it. But it's those little slip ups where the average Joe here in this country should question, what the hell is he talking about? What is going on here? That should be the first thing on your mind, but people just let it slide by and, hey, all right, we have 57 states now.
Well, he had me the second time he said Michael instead of Michelle. That kind of stood out to me from that point on. I was like, no, hold on, he's telling us something there.
Yeah.
But I digress on that. So is that pretty clear? I mean, a status tied to the District of Columbia and federal territories.
Yeah.
So, if a municipality is going to claim that they have jurisdiction over you, it's going to be through something like licensing, registrations, voter registrations, the Residency Act, that would bind you to the 10 square miles of the District of Columbia.
Yeah. Well, hey, that leads me right to another thing that always pops in my head that I've talked to people about. When I've told them, hey, you got to, when you change your status, you got to fill out certain paperwork. It's just a few sheets, declaring you're an American and this and that. And they're like, well, no, you don't have to do any of that. But what they'd fail to realize is what you're talking about. You're tied into that system through all these little contracts that you have made along the way in your journey.
Right.
That you have to get out of them.
Yeah, like when you first start a job and you fill out your first W-2 or 1099, unbeknownst to you, you're basically signing yourself up, for that and selective service. And at that point, if you don't know who you are and you don't rebut that or rescind it within a certain amount of time, from that point on, you're a debtor, chattel slave, a ward of the state, which they consider you that after you're 7 years old anyways through your birth certificate. But that's a different thing than the Social Security side. So, you can always tell which one of those they're going off of through the municipalities when you're getting summons to court, all in how, they spell the names. It's usually all caps. It's either going to be your first middle initial, no period, last name, or last name, first name, middle initial. And, there's a couple other variations they do, but that's kind of how how they're operating.
Yeah.
Not that they ever stick to like one specific jurisdictional type thing that they believe they have authority over, but I'll leave that there. So as an American state national, a national of your state, someone who claims their birthright political status tied to the land and soil jurisdiction of their native state, you would basically fill out your 1779 in your political status declaration. You'd have 2 witness testimonies minimum to undo all of those little micro tacit agreements that you never got full disclosure to. And that would be the easiest way to address that. Now, do you want to talk about the recognition? How they say, oh, these are like fraudulent documents, or oh, you can't do that. The statutory side, our foreign subcontractor agents have no authority to tell you whether you can status correct or not. They don't have that type of authority. That would be stepping into our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And that's a crime. And they can be.
What a lot of people don't realize is, I think I said this before on a video in the past that, back in the day, like 20, 30, 40 years ago, they had, on certain documents, they had a choice of state national on there. It used to be there. They just kind of phased it out as years gone by to, make people think it's just them. You can only be a U.S. citizen or a non-resident alien or, all kinds of crazy shit. But it used to be on there, and it's still valid. They just don't put it on the papers no more. And now what we're seeing is everything's done online. So they're forcing you even harder. You got to actually print out a hard copy, write it down. No, I'm a state national.
That's all those options, those were there up into the late 80s. And then I noticed in the 90s up into the early 2000s, I think around 2008 when the Clearfield Doctrine went through, that's when I started noticing the majority of those options went away. And I think there was one specific one that ties you to those, off the shoreline islands, which was an American national.
Yeah.
So since then, though, they don't even put that on them. You have to literally go through a passport process just to be identified as that. And if you want to be an international global traveler, that's great. And you want to go that route, whatever. But, the only way to truly alleviate all of these issues and concerns that are keeping you and your family and, just your, your kids and your kids' future secured, the only way to do that is to come back to the land and soil, and start reconstructing, undoing all of those Reconstruction Acts that they wrote in the turn of the 18th century.
I know that is the, even though we're talking about UCC and statutory law today, the most important thing out of every one of the videos that we make, that it should be just like people. We have, I say it all the time at the end, stand up, speak up. We got to start doing stuff. You got to start joining your assemblies. You got to start finding out the right information, get to the right assembly in your state or in your county, and start working. We have to do this. Look at the way things are going. It's getting bad, Can
I address something that's being said?
Yeah.
People try to cite case law or maxims of law that predate the incorporation. And what they fail to comprehend is, even though I know that all things that happened in the Marbury versus Madison, that would make something null and void. As a U.S. citizen, you don't get to cite stuff like that. You don't have that right because your status is not correct, and you don't get the first 10 amendments. You're lucky if you even see the 14th Amendment. Trust me, I know. 25 years dealing with these jokers.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. I've seen. I can't come up with the case law right now, but basically in it said, because of U.S. citizens are classified as residents, that's basically the only right that they have, to be honest, is to reside within this country.
Well, technically anything enforceable on that's only supposed to be within the 10 square miles of the District of Columbia.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that slowly trickled into the several other states. And they can get away with that because everything's statutory and civil ran. That's supposed to be for federal employees. Well, guess who they've reclassified as a federal employee through taxation?
Yeah.
The individual, you. And it's not the uppercase, lowercase u or the lowercase u. It's the all caps you. The person who owes a debt to the corporation. You can go look that up. Take my word for it. Go look at Black's Law.
Yeah.
But anyway, most Americans are unknowingly misidentified as federal citizens due to the paperwork they filed at birth, or it has something to do with when they're claiming the name that they're giving their progeny, the parents who are the informants. So through that birth certificate process, and then this misidentification places them under statutory law, which governs corporate entities and legal fictions. And whenever you try to make these arguments about being the living man, they're hip to it. They've been knowing about that for about the past 10 years, maybe a little bit more, maybe 15 years back. People started using that type of language. And yeah, I've had arguments, or slights made against me because I know that words have numerous meanings in their jurisdiction. So when I send something, or I have a secretary send something, I make sure to check, parse, syntax, grammar. Not that that's used, as Americans, but when you're dealing with these corporate entities and fictions at these agencies, our contractors, they tend to try to argue with you about the language that you're using and saying, oh, that's not proper English, or this isn't spelled right, or there isn't a punctuation here. Well, yeah, I know what I'm doing. You should go read a Styles manual.
Yeah.
It's done that way for a very valid reason.
So, hey, Adam, real quick, I see John Harmon in the chat saying I need to get out of property tax. Well, you know what? I don't see any way out of property tax other than joining your assembly, getting your courts running, and helping the state take care of that issue. That's the only way it's going to happen.
Right.
That's why we're asking and pleading and telling people, get to your, number one, status correct, get in your assembly, and then we can do things, that's where it's at.
Right. And it's not just coming in, without any knowledge base or any foundation. You're going to get that. I mean, most assemblies offer education. There's places you can go to study up articles and history and get the rundown of what's going on. And it's not going to happen overnight where you find out what's going on or what you need to do, what your options are. It's probably going to take a good year to 2 years, depending on how quick you can comprehend things. And for me, it's been about, I don't know, I had a head start, because I had a lot of good mentoring, and I learned a little bit about administrative processes and stuff years ago that kind of made me question, that reality versus this reality that we're in with the living,
Well, when you put the pieces of the puzzle together, it all makes sense. It flows, on how you're being screwed, basically.
Yeah. So, to get back on topic with, declared American state nationals correct, their status by formally declaring, recording, and publishing their true political identity. This process reaffirms their allegiance to their state of the Union, not to Washington, D.C. And, if you're registered to vote as a U.S. citizen, all of that stuff's already predetermined. Your vote really doesn't matter. And the majority of the stuff that you would be voting for, they change in the middle of the night anyways. Nothing ever gets done, and just remove yourself from, being screwed around like that. I mean, they're literally passing the buck on everybody because they think you're too stupid or scared or conformed, or they're going to Charlie Kirk you if you try to speak up when you start noticing that things are wrong, which I've been noticing for my whole life. Have you just thought to yourself, hey, this something?
Yeah, I knew something was wrong in my teen years, and here I am. Finally, when you get a chance to find out what being a national is all about, and I jumped on it. I was like, yeah, I knew this was somewhere.
Right.
But anyways, so what is the UCC and what is statutory law? What do we got going on there?
Go ahead and unpack it.
Oh yeah, I guess it's the two legal frameworks that shape up modern governance. Of what we what we think is modern governance. These corporations that are service providers. That's what I'm saying. Uniform Commercial Code and Statutory Law. These are central to understand why declared American state nationals claim their exemption from that authority. And really, we shouldn't even have to claim exemption, because being exempt from something means you were part of it and you're trying to get out. It's kind of like us for taxpayers. We're not exempt from taxes either. We just don't pay taxes. We're non-payers.
Yeah, it's the remedy that you're owed. They owe you a way out, and that's one of the things that I had a talk with one of those guys down in Columbus. I'm not going to mention any names, but he got kind of squirmy on the phone with me, and he thought that I was being rude or something by saying, well, you're the one that's supposed to be over this process. You're the one that's supposed to offer remedy, a way out. You can't just have people get unknowingly, tacitly, provoked into something like licensing or registration. And then in your program, it says you're over it and that you have to implement it as time goes on, as things change. Well, I'm here telling you that's your job to create the out. You owe that to us. You're our employee, our contractor, right?
Yeah.
And you owe us the remedy, which is the way out.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that the way out needs to be discussed, because all you got to do is look at some of these acts back in the 60s when they took away the gold and silver. Or what was that? No, that was the 60s. So how could people pay, when you read the contract we gave them, that's the only money, gold and silver. So once you take that away, you have to give a way out from paying your debts. And what was it? We're supposed to basically, there's processes where we use our credit to pay that stuff, but they're not.
You're supposed to be able to offset and discharge, and that's supposed to be the remedy that's owed. But the problem is that as time's gone on, these people aren't learning that, and they don't realize that it's their responsibility. So when people like us come along that read and that know what took place, whether it's plausible deniability on their part or not, and they're just trying to suppress the truth because they don't want attention on their office, those vacated offices don't lawfully belong to them.
Yeah.
They're for Americans.
Yeah.
And we could go that route too.
Same as the public buildings.
Right. We could go that route explaining that, but to be nice and just address the issues at hand that we're bringing to them without having to, talk about things like usurpation and whatnot.
Yeah.
They need to take notice.
All right. So what is the Uniform Commercial Code? What is the UCC?
So the UCC is a set of standardized laws that govern commercial transactions in the United States. It was developed to harmonize business laws across the states, and it's supposed to make it easier for companies to operate nationwide. So it'll cover things like sales and leases of goods, negotiable instruments like checks or money orders, bank deposits and collections, letters of credit, investment securities, various types of securities transactions, which we know that primarily take place in the administrative tribunals these days.
Yeah.
But, here's the key point of that. The UCC is designed, for corporate entities and artificial persons, not living men and women. And the UCC operates in the international jurisdiction of the sea. So, that's for things that are lost and dead at sea. These merchant marines that supposedly didn't return home after World War II or whatever. And you can find that in UCC. You can find that if you take a little deep dive back in history of jurisdictions, you're going to find stuff like that. So, the UCC operates in the international jurisdiction of the sea, and, which is commercial and contractual in nature. It's not just part of the land and soil jurisdiction where American state nationals reside. we argue that unless you voluntarily enter into a commercial contract governed by the UCC, it has no authority over you. So, for instance, you get an offer to contract, which is what a summons is, and they're also talking to a legal fiction that they want you to, unknowing to you, they want you to identify as that thing, and that thing is it's an instrumentation. They turn that into a security. Your signature, they turn that into a security. It securitizes their bonds. It securitizes all of those things that they profit from. And man, they love playing word salad games with you to get you to identify as that thing, whichever variation it is. And man, we could talk about that, just some of the things I've witnessed. Have you ever just went and sat and watched how they talk and the language they use and how they basically stop people to identify as this?
Well, you know what? What's even sadder than that is trying to watch some of these people that they want to be sovereign. They want to be, they want to do things on their own, and they go into these courts, which I've been telling you guys forever. These are C jurisdiction courts. We do not belong in them. Men and women do not belong in the courts. They're dragging us in. But anyways, watching these people trying to do their best with all the everything they know, trying to spit this out, and the judges, they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit.
I've seen people
they start talking, well, I have a constitutional right. They'll tell you to your face. They wipe their ass with the Constitution in there. They don't care. So people need to wake up. Wake up. Those courts are not for men and women.
They're not operating under proper oaths of office. They have foreign agent registration. They have a lot of things are out of alignment for them to even be doing what they're doing. So first of all, they're not Americans. They're not status corrected. They're not Article 3 judges. They're not under common law.
Yeah.
They are operating statutorily, commercial equity, what have you. And, they're going to threaten you. They're going to put you under duress, or they're going to coerce you to go along with their theatrics. And if you say anything that, any of those magic words, even the people that do their revocation of election to pay taxes and they do private trusts, and they pierce those all the time because people don't do their research and know how to stand. I mean, you shouldn't be arguing with these contractors as it is. But, and again, more crimes, more unlawful conversion, more peonage, more, just all the things. I could go down a list and,
Yeah. So, okay, well, that's a good rundown of UCC. What about statutory law? You kind of went over that a little bit, but what is statutory law?
Well, it refers to laws enacted by legislative bodies, Congress, state legislators, and municipal councils. These laws are codified in statutes and apply to persons. Just in case you guys didn't know, there's about 5 to 6 potential type of persons within the jurisdiction of the de facto government. So, we happen to be one that's misidentified, and we don't belong in the de facto government side of things. We belong on the American de jure side of things.
Yeah, Adam, real quick. I know I've harped on this before, time and time again. These two foreign corporations down in D.C. who, they're governmental service providers. That's it. They're not the government. Well, because of what they're doing, changing all this stuff, I kind of lost my track of thought. But yeah, Americans are not subject to legislation made by their employees. These guys are our subcontractors. They're our employees. Why in the hell would we let them run the employer? It doesn't work that way. This stuff's got to sink in your guys' head, because it's absolutely I guess, fucking crazy.
Right.
To have your employees tell you this is what you're going to follow. Nuts.
Yeah, that was supposed to be created for them and federal employees. These subcontractor agents who were supposed to be there to kind of help us as Reconstruction's taking place. But as you can see, the topic we discussed the other night, they've rewritten the Reconstruction Act several different times. Yeah. And it's gotten more and more commercial, statutory-esque, and heading towards, further into the incorporation phase of their agenda. And it leads up to now to where it seems like they do it in increments of 100 years, and people forget, people die, people's families don't pass on the information, and then we end up, to 1966, where people are U.S. citizens, not Americans, ratifying a defunct state constitution that was rewritten by foreign agents.
Yeah.
It wasn't ratified by the people. The original Ohio 1803.
1803.
Okay, when Chillicothe was the capital, that was the Constitution that was ratified by the people. Okay, all of these fraudsters, people who were, in dual capacities outside of the Titles and Nobility Act, not following the rules that govern them, went in and rewrit everything. And then 100 years goes by, and 1966 area. Oh, there's been a controversy that's been going on for 100 years, and most of the people died off. So anyhow, you got U.S. citizens now ratifying something that was for Americans to ratify. So yeah. You can look across the, the 50 states and all their constitutions, you're going to find a similar story. UCMJ's United, it's for the military. Okay. So.
Yeah. So we got about statutory law. I guess law versus code, a jurisdictional, it's a jurisdictional divide. There is a sharp distinction between law and code, really. The law of the land is common law, natural law, constitutional law. This is the jurisdiction of the living people, the men and women, sovereign states. The law of the sea that we talk about, these foreign corporations, commercial law, maritime law, and statutory law. This is the jurisdiction of corporations and legal fictions. That's that whole sea jurisdiction. They're legal fictions.
Yep.
Declared American state nationals claim to operate exclusively under the law of the land. They reject presumptions that they are corporate entities subject to codes and statutes. By correcting their political status, they assert their standing as living men and women, not persons under corporate governance. We talk about that all the time. Corporate governance.
Yes, this is Restore the Republic. Mm-hmm. It was just a question. So,
yeah,
lots of questions tonight.
Yeah, so let's get into, that was the code and law. We went over the UC statutory stuff. Now the birth certificate and the legal fiction that ties this all in together. So how does the birth certificate tie you to statutory law?
Well, when your birth certificate's registered, the government creates a corporate entity, a straw man account, basically. And for anybody that says that's, some type of conspiracy theory, look at any retention contract that an attorney gives you, and somewhere in the fine print on there, it says you're giving them power of attorney over your straw man estate. So just, the more you know, do what you will with it. So basically, in your name, they're doing this. The birth certificate will start out with how you fill it out, uppercase and lowercase, what your parents do. And then, when you get it back, you'll have one that's naturalized and the other side is going to be commercialized, and it'll be all caps. So, that's why there's people doing all of these authentication processes on their long form, or, back in my day, the one with the informant signature they were little rectangular pieces of wax paper with a stamp and seal that was about 4x7 or something like that. Just a little teeny, about that big, could fit in a Ziploc baggie. Nowadays, the big copies you get are like the size of a commercial title that you would get for a car. But anyhow, you, the living man or woman, are not that entity. You're not the all cap name. You're not the, the fictitious person that they created that public usufruct. So, but unless you correct the record, the system treats you as if you are. It's that simple. That's why, when you don't know who you are and you go into these tribunals, they're going to get you, And even if you know a little bit about something, they're going to try to tap dance around the fact that you probably had some rights violations, some improper service, all the things, that aren't going to give them subject and subject matter, personal jurisdiction, which, technically if you're not properly serviced, through the proper channels, which the crap they're doing nowadays is not. And the grounds for them to serve you anyways is not being properly utilized in law. It's all, usually it's retaliation,
Well, that they have a 98% win rate in them courts, that's for a reason.
Yeah, like for instance, you don't show up to something that you probably weren't properly serviced on, to be able to go handle for your administrator or to speak on behalf of, that entity. They're going to usually do some type of capias, bench warrant, suspend your. They do all kinds of stuff, but it's usually retaliation because they have 28 days to renew performance and bid bonds, or they expire, and they get pissed off over that because they want their few million bucks they're trying to steal from you.
Yeah.
So, that's just high level. I don't want to get too far off into the weeds, but this is why we emphasize the importance of status correction. By declaring your true status, you separate yourself from, those legal fictions and remove yourself from statutory jurisdiction, plain and simple.
Yeah.
They don't get unlimited times to try and, obtain jurisdiction through means of deception and, word salad games and you name it. I mean, if they didn't give you the proper service, you shouldn't even be having that talk. You should be doing some type of 12B in the form of a demur, which is, your motion to dismiss. I mean, you got, you failed to state a claim. There's no injured party. There's no competent witness. The state's not a living man or woman. I'm in the wrong venue, simply. Who are you trying to talk to? I'm here to speak on behalf of that all caps thing that you sent in the mail. Oh, where do you live? Well, I don't live where you think I live,
Well, I'll tell you what, this whole birth certificate thing, it's where it starts, it's where these moms have signed up, without full disclosure, so it's not their faults. But that's one of the things that you guys out there watching, that's us as sheriffs, we're going to be working on, especially in our county assemblies. We're going to get to these hospitals, we're going to get to these administrators, and you know what? They're going to find out that sooner or later, these births you're going to have to give these mothers an option. They can be an American if they want to be, you can't take that right away from them. So we got to get them back to reclaiming their sovereignty, these newborns and everything. So how do we reclaim our sovereignty, Adam?
So reclaiming your sovereignty, we can outline a process involving a declaration of political status, recording your status with your county or state, and then publishing your status to make it a matter of public record, which we know they don't operate with matters of public, record stuff. They say that they record things and it's on the record, but we come to find out.
Hey, before you go any further, I just have to let the audience know this little story. I've told you before, I went in to file some records into my county's records office, and I'm standing in there, and the guy asked me, what I wanted. I gave him my paperwork. He looked at it and read it, and a lot of the stuff we use isn't in their, they're not used to it. So he's like, "Well, I can't accept this." And I I said to him, I said, "Well, if you don't accept it, it's going to get worse for you." And I meant that as in like, I'm going to probably take steps to, maybe get you in trouble since you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, your job. And so he took it out. He hit the panic button. So about 15 or 20 people come running in the room, and, they run right by me because I'm just standing there, not causing any problem. And they're looking around, jumping around. What's going on? And they look at me, and I said, I don't know what's going on.
So what you're
It's
referring
just
to,
like that just, man, blows your mind.
they're supposed to act impartial. They're not supposed to judge or read something or go, hold on a second, let me go have the magistrate or judge read it. They're supposed to simply file it on the record. That's it.
Yeah.
When they go do all this other stuff, like this Dina chick I have on Summit County that has a problem with that, or just not filing things at all, that's when criminal incident reports get filled out, whether they want to recognize it or not. That's a record now in our jurisdiction. So take note of that. And,
So basically what you were saying is what we talk about all the time. You declare your political status, just an American. You record it.
So, we reference the 1779 Naturalization Act, which allows Americans born on the land to reclaim their birthright status. This act predates the federal government, is considered part of the law of the land, not the federal government's version of the law of the land, which is, where they claim to have land jurisdiction and, federal authority with their federal agencies and yada, yada. That's all usurpation. So the American States Assemblies help guide people through this process, offering templates, education, and, community support. So if that sounds like something people need and they would like to educate themselves and get papered up, you're going to get a lot of people like Sheriff Andrew and myself to help you through the process. Not every state is as far along in their reconstruction, but we're getting there.
Yeah, look at Dewan Perry in the chat. He says he's did his 928s, and for a lot of people that don't understand, that's just some extra paperwork you can do that just puts a coat of armor around you. It's really good stuff.
He's qualified to fill any position.
Yeah,
that's what that means. It's not necessary, but go ahead.
Oh yeah, I've done it. I liked it. I like knowing I have all that stuff recorded. So why do state nationals reject the UCC and statutory or statutes? Why do we reject it? Any answer, Adam?
Personally, I reject it because why would I get out of one series of tacit agreements just to put myself in another agreement with them through the Secretary of State's office?
Yeah.
If you're doing UCC ones and all that stuff's great, I learned about it, but at the end of the day, you got maybe 1 out of 10 chance that you're going to get some type of remedy. Other than that, you're going to get steamrolled on. And I hate to say it, but maybe it's not that way everywhere. Some of these actors in robes run from stuff like that, but a lot of them don't.
Yeah.
At least here,
Yeah. So now the heart of the matter: why are declared American state nationals not obligated to follow UCC or statutory law?
Because that's kind of commercial. It has nothing to do with us. It's not American common law, for starters, and it's not natural to us. God's law, natural law, and American common law are the things that we tend to focus on. and all of that other stuff is for our contractors, people that are filling these vacated positions, even though they're claiming that they're in those positions and they're still vacated positions until the Americans reconstruct. That's what we need you people to know, is that whether you're lowercase people or uppercase P people, status corrected or not, those positions are vacated for the reconstruction to happen, for those positions to be reclaimed. And that's what these commercial agencies need to comprehend. It's about 160 years past the fact, and people are starting to read again because they're not happy with the I guess the entertainment industry. They're starting to wake up and realize that it's all just to give them brain rot and keep their brains from thinking about what's going on in the background. Why is education the way it is? Why is taxation getting worse and worse? Why is there never any end, to this nonsense? And these people are just getting greedier and greedier. And then they want to shut, their de facto down and, cut off services and all this type of stuff that they owe to the people. Well, that's because they never cared. They haven't cared in over 160 years. When are people going to wake up and realize this and start cutting fence and go sort some fuckers out? It's past the talking point. We offer amnesty and education and all that, but some of these people don't deserve amnesty, to put it simply. So, excuse my French. I got a little excited. I was having too much fun reading.
Hey, Adam, I see a good question in the chat there. John Harmon says, do you still have a Social Security number, and do you still vote?
No. No and no.
No and no. We don't need them. And you know what? The voting, that's just like explained before, these are foreign corporations in D.C., so they're corporate elections. They already know who they want in place, and they're doing that while the people are out here thinking they have a part of it, thinking they got a chance to elect their person. Doesn't matter. We talk about it all the time. One bird, two different wings.
Right.
Shit.
Yeah, nothing's going to happen until people start putting their heads together, think tanking, forming community groups. And, if men would be men and they wouldn't be separated from their mothers and fathers at an early age and broken homes because the system that we currently have in place, there's been an agenda going on for the past 50 or 60 years to destroy the family unit because it generates more revenue for them. They know that loving parents are going to fight for their progeny. They're going to come back. They're going to spend whatever it takes to protect their kids. Well, some of us figured out that no, I'm not lining your pockets, and I'll just meet you on the other side of your punishment. I'll be the guy throwing the lever.
Well, you know what? I think we reject the UCC because of jurisdiction. We argue the UCC is statutory law operates in international jurisdiction of the sea and the air, corporate realms. Declared state nationals operate in the jurisdiction of the land and soil. We tell you that all the time, which is governed by common law, like Adam said. It's just the way it is. We got to get we got to get our audience, our people, the de facto people, to comprehend these jurisdictions. As sheriffs, I'm just going to speak for myself. I go out and talk to, city councils. And just earlier today, I talked to an ex-law enforcement officer, and nobody really understands jurisdiction. They look at it a different way, like, as a geographical area. They'll say our jurisdictions within the city, sheriff's jurisdictions, and it's not, we're not talking about that. We're talking about jurisdiction of law. Who not governs, but who takes care of certain things in law. And it being part of the land and soil, a sheriff of the soil jurisdiction, we are above everyone else in this county, especially the commercial sheriffs and the law enforcement. They're actually working for they're in the C jurisdiction. They're working for a foreign corporation, a franchise of a franchise. And that's who tells them what to do. That's why all these people are getting harmed all the time. That's why, if you don't show them your ID, they bust your fucking window out.
Right.
They don't care.
Yeah, we're gold and silver only, ideally. As far as the ens legis, there is a such thing as a common law trust, a private trust, private irrevocable trust that you would put inside of each other, and then you would put that into a foreign express trust that's off the shores and outside of international jurisdiction here. And usually that's going to require you to have some type of contact overseas in some area, like I said, outside of that jurisdiction. So that way it's not penetrable. But like I said, these guys are fraudsters or criminals. They really don't care, because what are you going to do to them? You got to go with witnesses into these types of places. You got to record. You got to have backing, because, at the end of the day, if you just go in there by yourself, they're going to have their way with you,
Yeah.
Well,
Adam, some of the common misunderstandings and pushback, of course, this perspective is, it's controversial. Critics argue that statutory law applies to everyone within the U.S. borders. Courts rarely recognize our correction documents,
Right.
Law enforcement operates under statutory authority. This system is corrupt and operates on presumption. They presume that we're U.S. citizens and we're not. That's what they're doing. They're presuming all this shit. They presume that the laws of their statutory laws. We emphasize the importance of standing your ground, knowing your rights, and refusing to contract with the system. Stay out of their system. We've told you that before. You need to stay out of their courts. Kind of toe the line until you get your counties and state assemblies running. We got to stay out of their courts. We also distinguish between lawful and legal. Lawful refers to natural law and common law. That's lawful. Legal refers to corporate statutes and codes.
Right.
They're two separate things, lawful and legal. You hear them a lot. So the conclusion, Adam, are declared American state nationals subject to UCC and statutory law?
No, we are not. No, we argue that the UCC statutory law operate in the international jurisdiction of the sea and air jurisdiction. So that's corporate commercial realms. Our declared state nationals operate in the jurisdiction of the land and soil, whether it be state or the national soil jurisdiction on the county. And there's another variation of the national level. But these are governed by common law. In the original state constitutions, not these commercialized ones that came. Some states vary, but around 1830 to 1852, 1856, that's around the time. If you're looking through all the state constitutions, you'll find that, much like Ohio, the majority of them did the same type of switcheroo on them.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, Allie in the comments says, can you please cover the process to become an American national again, please? I think Allie needs to remember we're not American nationals. That would be one of the de facto's groups, right, Adam? One of the...
Well, if you were going to do that, you would do your revocation of election, filling out their forms, and then you would do your passport process. You're probably going to check with the Office of the INS to see if there's any record of your naturalization or as being a U.S. citizen within 7 to maybe 30 days. I got mine back in like 10 days. They're going to send something that says, no, there's no record of you being a U.S. citizen. Obviously, they can't admit to that. So they're going to acquiesce and say, no, there's no record. So you take that and you keep it. And whenever you're doing your, an S10 form, there's a specific way you have to fill that out. And I can't remember off the top of my head. for this podcast, but there's plenty of people out there that teach that type of stuff. It's just not what we do.
Yeah, I heard you saying the process, and I'm thinking, yeah, we're not trying to tell it. What we are American state nationals.
Right.
Totally different.
Well, I was in the service, so being the the passport thing,
Yeah.
I knew about that a long time ago, so I went ahead and did that process.
Yeah.
And it worked. I never had any trouble. I always got expedited through lines and never had to wait. No questions. Carry-on wasn't a problem. So, but
Yeah.
just a way to basically not have to deal with going through customs or, long x-ray lines and all that type of nonsense at airports.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap this up, Adam. I just want to let everybody know that, this isn't about you. It's about your children, about your community, about your country. Their system only works if you stay asleep. So wake up, stand up, and speak up. Restore the republic. Want everybody to remember, if you're looking toward getting status corrected, you need to check out these sites. We can help you through them anytime. Ask questions. We'll get you the answers. But if you go to tasa.americanstatenationals.org, it's tasa.americanstatenationals.org, or on the screen you see claimyourinheritance.info or pktfnews.org. You go to these sites, you'll find a way to start correcting your status. Remember that we do have a Cash App. If anybody wants to donate, it's $APC 140. Be much appreciated. For all the people that have donated, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. So, until next time, Adam, thanks a lot for spreading the word and your knowledge.
No problem. Go check out the Reeve Shop Talk 44. Send me ideas what you want me to cover.
There you go. I think here soon I think we're just going to have a big Q&A one of these days. So we'll let everybody know. Come in and start writing your questions down now. Everything and anything. Right.
Yeah. The TASA. She wants the TASA site again.
It's tasa.americanstatenationals.org. tasa.americanstatenationals.org.
Yeah, listen to the replay towards the end. You'll get it.
All right, everybody. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you again soon.
Take her easy.
Restore the republic.